you have stated a view that the writers and editors of the New Testament show themselves willing to bend the text of the New Testament in order to fulfill their certain theological objectives. To what extent do you think this is true of the gospel writers themselves? I recall an event in Matthew, the Egypt flight to Egypt, in which Matthew says that this occurs in order to fulfill prophecy in Hosea, and yet we see no other evidence of an Egypt flight from any of the other contemporaneous sources.
Right.
Do you think that this is good evidence of gospel writers themselves being willing to add stories in for the sake of presenting Jesus as somebody who fulfills prophecy? And to what extent do you think this undermines trust in each of the gospel writers?
It can be said that there's no person in history that's more responsible for saving Jews from converting to Christianity than the author of the book of Matthew. Because if Matthew had never been written, imagine that for a moment. So they had 3 Gospels instead of 4. So you don't have these, you're referring to these 11 fulfillment citations that are unique to Matthew. So what happened was, because Matthew lied deliberately in a Machiavellian, it's a complete scam, lied, altered text completely, ripped verses out of context, collapsed passages in a way that made it for many Jews who might find, in the ancient, you imagine the medieval period in the 13th, imagine being in England in the good old days, and you're a Jew in York, and Christianity is all the way on top of everything, and you're a low Jew. You just go look at the grandness of the church and look at the pathetic predicament of the Jew. But then even if you find this attractive, and this Christianity has something to be very attractive, there are things in Christianity that make it very attractive, which you could talk about if you like. But then you come to this and go, whoa, okay, this is a complete lie. I've got to stay with it. You mentioned Matthew 2, verse 13, 14, and 15, where Jesus, in the infancy narrative, is taken by Joseph, along with his mother, to Egypt to escape Herod the Great, who is killing all the children in Nazareth who are 2 years and younger. And then he misquotes Hosea 11, verse 1, but he's very carefully only quoting the last part of Hosea 11:1. So he said, this is to fulfill what is said, out of Egypt have I called my son. But he does not quote the first part of Hosea 11:1, when Israel was a child, then I loved him, and out of Egypt have I called my son. So it's clearly talking about Israel. And it even gets even crazier than that. Most people pay attention to that, but what he does in the beginning of that chapter is just completely bonkers. Sorry. In chapter 2, verse 6, in explaining why the Messiah had to be born in Bethlehem, is really crazy. So he supposedly is quoting Micah chapter 5, verse 2, or verse 1 in the Jewish Bible. The number count is different there. And the text in Micah 5 is telling us that Bethlehem is a very important place, because out of Bethlehem, I'm paraphrasing here, will come forth a great ruler. Okay. Now, if you just read that first part of the text, Bethlehem, Judah, you're not least among Judah, of course, out of you will come a great ruler. Okay. Now, if we had nothing else, we could say the Messiah is supposed to be born in Bethlehem, and you would be right to believe that. It would make complete sense. That would be a fair reading of the text. However, there's a modifier at the end of it in Micah, and the modifier is umoitzoisov, and his origins, like motzi, hamotzi lechem, like where does it come from? Umoitzoisov mikedem, which means from ancient days, mimei olam, from the old days, from the old times, okay? So that part says that the connection between Mashiach and Beis Lechem is that the Mashiach has an ancestor who is from Beis Lechem, namely David, who was born in Beis Lechem. See 1 Samuel chapter 17, 56, that David was born in Beis Lechem. Therefore, so now we know Micah is making it very clear that the connection between the Mashiach and Beis Lechem is not that the Mashiach is born in Beis Lechem, but Umoitzosav, his origins. What's the connection is from the old days. So that modifier at the end of the passage in Micah tells us it's not talking about the Mashiach born in Bethlehem, but rather David was from Beis Lechem. That's the connection. So Matthew has to destroy that. That's not possible. What is Micah? So if you read Matthew chapter 2, verse 6, he quotes it, but when he gets after the word ruler, he then ends, and you should be a shepherd over Israel, or you should be a ruler over Israel. He extracted the words, and his origins are from ancient times, from olden days, and replaces it with, he shall be a ruler in Israel. What? Now, what he did was he collapsed it all and goes to the next verse in Micah chapter 5 and just subtracts it. Look, in the United States, in Israel, and in England, if you were to do that with a contract, with a legal contract, you go to jail for that. You lose your license to practice law. There are people sitting in prison right now in every civilized country for committing this crime of altering a text for a benefit. And that's exactly what Matthew engaged in. He does this specifically 11 times, makes up verses. It's the Christian Bible is just a crime scene. It's almost supernatural to the point that I often have wondered if God did this to whoever wrote the book of Matthew so that anyone who could see the truth could find it so easily because it's so transparent. It's almost hard to believe that it's almost supernaturally insane.